this meeting to order.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to meeting number 5 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23rd, 2020. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the community or the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are in fact available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either the floor, English, or French. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is speaking in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the directives from the Board of Internal Economy regarding masking and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. With regard to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain the order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee is meeting today to commence its study on the main estimates 2020-21, as well as the supplementary estimates B to 2021. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome our witnesses. First off, the Honorable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, as well as Kelly Gillis, the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. Minister McKenna, once again, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank my team, including my Deputy Minister, Kelly Gillis, and everyone who's been able to put this together virtually. I'm pleased to appear before the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities to answer any questions on the 20 to 2021 main and supplementary estimates B.
There is no doubt that the COVID epidemic continues to have a tremendous effect on our country, on our health and on our well-being, on our economy and on the work of the government. Many things have changed since the beginning of the pandemic. Even if Infrastructure Canada has adapted its programs to better respond to the priorities and responsibilities, and we are working very hard to obtain results for Canadians.
2020 to 2021 fiscal year include items that required adjustments for a variety of reasons, and we are seeking a net increase of $52.9 million. For example, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we launched the new Canada Healthy Communities Initiative to support community-driven solutions that improve quality of life. To accomplish this, we are seeking $4.9 million of unused 2019 to 2020 funds from the Smart Cities Challenge program for this new initiative. Canadians are adapting to the realities of COVID-19, and this program will help us keep people safe and healthy, support economic recovery, and build pandemic-resilient communities.
With regard to the corridor project for Champlain, we are planning $48.3 million unused funds in 2019-2020. We are asking as well for the transfer of $310 million from the Human Research Council to transportation to public transport. And these efforts are long-term and are seeking to create strong communities and economic and cultural and environmental advantages for the future. This is a historic plan to invest in Canada.
To getting out of this economic crisis and ensuring our long-term prosperity, and to building a cleaner and more resilient future for all Canadians, the foundation of our departmental plan. Since March 1st, under the largest program led by my department, the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, we've approved over 700 projects representing a federal investment of over $1.2 billion. This contributes to good jobs across the country, from planning to design to construction to businesses all along the supply chain. We also launched a new COVID-19 stream within that program. These projects will benefit from an increased 80% federal cost share in the provinces and 100% cost share for Indigenous projects and projects in the territories. Projects like upgrading schools or long-term care homes with things like HVAC and physical distancing measures, or building new parks, cycling and walking paths to help Canadians get outside and stay active. We're also pleased to see the Canada Infrastructure Bank hitting its stride under new board chair Michael Sabia and new CEO Aaron Corey, with projects like the $815 million irrigation plan for southern Alberta as part of the bank's 3-year, $10 billion growth plan. But it's not enough for governments to simply shovel out infrastructure dollars. It's about the outcomes Canadians get in return. Every taxpayer dollar that is spent will do triple duty, creating jobs and economic growth, making communities cleaner and more resilient, and meeting our goal of net zero by 2050, and making communities inclusive so that everyone has a fair shot to succeed. Chaque dollar de l'argent.
Every dollar from taxpayers will be used to the best to create employment and to help communities be more resilient in achieving net zero, and to have equal communities where everyone has an opportunity to succeed.
Third, we set out our government's ambition to create 1 million jobs as we recover from the economic shock of the pandemic. Investments in infrastructure are key to that ambition. Nous contribuons au redressement.
We are contributing to the restoration of the economy by helping Canadians to create new infrastructure, to create employment, and to contribute to building a stronger country, a cleaner country, healthier country, and more connected country. Yeah, I thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Madam Minister. We'll now go to the speaking order. We'll start off with the Conservative Party. Thank you. Mr. Scheer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. I don't know what the weather's like in Ottawa, but I hope you're doing well. I'm glad that you referenced the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, because I had a few questions on that. You used the term hitting its stride. Many people would call the Canadian Infrastructure Bank stumbling out of the gates. It's been around for almost 4 years now, and it's been allocated $35 billion. I'm wondering if you can tell us what the operating expense is, what the operating costs are for the Canadian Infrastructure Bank on a yearly basis.
I would like to welcome the member for Regina Capel. It's great to see him as the new critic for infrastructures and communities. The weather here, it's not amazing, but it's not terrible. We announced our net zero plan legislation today, so that was good. I was outside. I certainly think it's the importance that your party puts on infrastructure that you're in this position. And in terms of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, I mean, I think it plays an extremely important role. I would hope that the Conservative Party would agree with that, because we need more infrastructure built, and we need to bring in the private sector to do that. I am happy to get back to him. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is an independent organization, and we're happy to follow up with the answer to his question.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Minister. And this is our first time to participate in a parliamentary format like this. So it's I appreciate you acknowledging that. And you talked about the need for more infrastructure, and that's where I'm kind of puzzled of why you're using the Canadian Infrastructure Bank as an example of getting more infrastructure. So perhaps you could tell this committee something that the Prime Minister did not want to do, which is to answer a very simple question, and that is, how many projects has the Infrastructure Bank completed in its almost 4 years of existence and $35 billion allocation of taxpayers' money? How many projects have been completed?
Minister.
Well, I'd like to thank the member for the question. As I say, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is now hitting its stride. It is moving forward in a whole range of projects. Probably the best one, and I'm happy to accompany the member opposite when circumstances allow to view the REM. The REM project in Montreal, extremely popular project. It's creating thousands of jobs. It's also going to help grow the economy there. I also would point to an announcement that was just made with the government of Alberta, a new MOU with a conservative government who recognizes the importance of bringing of the bank and bringing in the private sector. This is something that actually I'm sure the member opposite would appreciate because it's also very important to his province. Modernizing irrigation district infrastructure and increasing water storage capacity. This is going to result in an $850 million in investment, creating 6,800 direct and indirect permanent jobs.
Mr. Scheer?
Okay, so you referenced two projects, one that you've signed a memorandum of understanding, but the question was, you've had almost 4 years with this institution. This was announced with great fanfare. This was going to be your government's signature vehicle to do infrastructure differently, and it was supposed to lead to dozens and dozens of private sector funds investing in these types of projects. So here we are, almost 4 years out, $35 billion, millions of dollars worth of operating costs. You must have completed something. Can you just tell this committee how many projects have been finished? How many projects have been completed? Not memorandums of understanding, not work underway, but how many projects have actually been completed?
Minister?
As the member opposite would know, it actually takes some time. I know everyone at REM project is working extremely hard. They would love to see it completed, but it doesn't work like that. Some of the other engagements, the Contrecoeur Port in Montreal, District Energy in Richmond, BC, hydroelectricity in the Northwest Territories. But maybe I just go to the Conservative Party's platform because I'm trying to understand. We do want to get more infrastructure built. That's why we're investing, for example, 13 times the amount of the Conservative Party in infrastructure. And when you were part of the party where wanted to kill $18 billion from the infrastructure budget, I'm just wondering if that is still your party's position and what projects in your riding would you want to kill? Because we have the town of Ituna Water District and Supply, new water and wastewater, lagoon expansion and new lift station, drinking water treatment systems. I would say that those are very important infrastructure investments. So it's not just the bank; it's what our government is doing, working with provinces and territories and municipalities.
With all due respect, Minister, with all due respect, you referenced the infrastructure bank. I'm just trying to get an understanding after allocating a $35 billion. I'm assuming the answer is zero. I don't know why if the answer is zero, you can't just say zero. And as you know, our P3 model and our infrastructure programs during our previous Conservative government got the job done. We built massive projects all across the country, and it was our commitment in the campaign to actually get things done. We've heard from stakeholders across the country that are saying dollars aren't flowing. We've heard from ministers in provincial government saying that there are projects submitted and waiting for federal approval. We could be getting more projects built, but there's a massive problem within the department actually getting those projects out the door. So I want to go back to the announcement that was made with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank. Mr. Sabia said during that press conference that hope isn't a plan, and that the plan that you and Mr. Sabia and the Prime Minister announced was the result of a serious analysis of current and potential projects. In short, this plan is real. Minister, have you seen the plan?
Minister?
Yeah, actually, the plan's public. I'm happy to share the growth plan. It's a $10 billion 3-year plan that the Canada Infrastructure Bank has announced. And I think it's really important. I totally agree with the member opposite about how important it is to get projects approved. We're in an economic crisis as well as a health crisis. In fact, I've got to give my department kudos because since the pandemic started, we've approved more than 700 projects worth over $1.3 billion. But I would come back to the fact that just take infrastructure and investments in public transit. We've invested 13 times what the previous government did. And that's actually creating jobs across the country. I'm happy to share the information with the member opposite.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Scheer. I am now going to go on to Mr. Sidhu. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Minister McKenna, Deputy Minister Gillis, and the whole team for being with us today. I will be splitting my time with my colleague, Mr. Rogers. Minister, This week, we welcomed you virtually to Brampton to make an announcement on Brampton's Riverwalk project, which will help unlock economic value in our city. Minister, climate change is real and the impacts can be seen across the country, including here in Brampton. Can you speak more on this project and other actions you are taking to enhance community resilience?
Minister?
Well, thank you very much. That was a really great project. It's a project that is a partnership with the federal government directly with the municipality. I think that it was great that we were able to make such a big investment. But let's talk about that project. And this is I like talking about real things. It's not just investments of money. It's investments in people and in the economy. So if you've been to Brampton, which actually I have had the chance to go to, this is going to make a huge difference in terms of dealing with flooding that we've seen there. So that the flooding is impacting thousands of residents of Brampton, but it also means that you can actually build more businesses, build more housing there. So this is an extremely important investment that is going to make a real difference. But you can look across, and that was $38 million. And it was going to create, I think that Mayor Brown had a number that was over 50,000 jobs, which is good jobs that we need right now. Our Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund has supported 59 projects across the country, providing $1.7 billion towards these projects. And the reality is, as you've said, that climate change is real and it's having a real impact that's imposing serious costs on Canadians. And we need to be making our communities more resilient to deal with the impacts of extreme weather, to deal with the realities of climate change. And we're going to continue to do that. I could list a whole range of projects that made a big difference that I've been able to witness in communities where people in the communities are so happy that we're actually taking their concerns seriously. Flooding has a real impact on people, has an impact on their health, it has an impact on their communities, and we can be more resilient and, of course, build a cleaner future.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Sadhu?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. We are very excited about this project. It's going to help the residents of Brampton so much. I'd like to pass it over to Mr. Rogers here.
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. Good to see you, and welcome as well to your officials. Minister, I know we've been introducing all kinds of programs to try to combat climate change. And we know that Canadians are keenly interested in greener transit fleets. Can you give us some idea, some updates about the kind of initiatives that government is taking to support electrification of transit systems?
Well, that's a really great question. So thank you very much to the member for the question. Look, we know that climate change is real, that emissions from the transportation sector are a significant portion of our emissions, and we have an opportunity to do a lot better by making investments in electric vehicles and more broadly in public transit. And it's really amazing because there's another benefit to that. It's Canadian supply chain. So you look at where electric buses are made, New Flyer in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Nova Bus, Lyon Bus in Quebec. So there's really great opportunities to be creating jobs while we do this. And I've made a number of investments across the country in terms of electric buses. We've made a commitment to 5,000 electric buses. We were just talking about the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Part of their growth plan is investing in electric buses with us so we can get more buses electrified. And that's a huge priority. And I've really seen that across the country, including in your own province.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, just a quick question around Universal Broadband Fund. Here in Atlantic Canada, we're very excited with the announcement about the Universal Broadband Fund, especially in our small rural communities, which depend on the internet to stay in touch with loved ones, to access government programs, and just to stay informed. So I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on the physical infrastructure that will be built in Atlantic Canada and the kind of jobs that might create.
Minister?
Well, thank you very much. So it is really critically important, the investments in broadband. I've heard from so many people across the country that with the pandemic, it's really demonstrated how challenging it is, that not having access to broadband, it's not just a productivity issue, it's an equity issue. It means that you can't homeschool your kids. It means you can't run your business online. It means increasingly you can't access your medical services. And so it's a huge impediment. And we announced recently the Universal Broadband Fund, $1.5 billion. Once again, the Canada Infrastructure Bank is also looking at how it can be a partner and expand that, because we have an opportunity to get broadband built. And in your community, it's our goal. The Prime Minister has accelerated the goal. Our goal is 98% of Canadians being connected by 2026. But my focus is, how does the Canada Infrastructure Bank move ahead as quickly as possible to connect as many people?
Mr. Rogers, quick question.
No, that's a final question for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. And
Great.
thanks, Minister, for these answers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and thank you, Minister McKenna. We'll now move on to Mr. Barcelou-Deville.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Welcome to the committee, Ms. McKenna. I heard you say earlier, talk about all kinds of projects with regard to infrastructure, but I didn't hear anything about, and I heard you talk about it before. Maybe you could give us some information on, for a year or so, we've been talking about criteria imposed on municipalities by the Canada-Quebec project, and there are many who write to us to say that they want to have access to infrastructure funds for their projects, and I wonder if there was something that might be possible, because you can understand that in a COVID, communities need money for their projects that could help them a great deal. Thank you very much for the question. Of course, the gas tax fund is very important for Quebec, and we've given $2.5 billion for communities. And when you look at how it functions, because I think it's really important to understand that in Quebec, the situation is different from the other provinces in Canada. Quebec is responsible for managing the gas tax fund through its own program to ensure that investments support infrastructure projects that directly benefit municipalities. And so the gas tax fund, the federal gas tax fund, finances public projects for cultural, tourist, and other projects, and they are administered by the municipalities. And I'm happy that the current government is adding the resilience in the face of COVID infrastructure program that will greatly help municipalities. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for reading the description of the program, but I wonder what's underway. And I was wondering whether I think the information that I have is that the problem is that many of the municipalities that are having trouble right now because of their drop in revenue, and I think it would be very helpful for them to get more infrastructure funds. There are many municipalities that have contacted me and that are suffering under COVID, and I think that they would they deserve to be heard by the federal government. And I would like to thank you, because earlier you talked about the infrastructure bank and under the Conservatives, but you talked about the Montreal Bridges project, and you were a minister in the past, and I think that you should be familiar with the file, and you should know as well that the projects were approved by the environmental assessment, federal assessment, and I'd like to know why there is still no federal funding for these programs, like the 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 Quebec project that has less than 10% funding, whereas it's a project that's very important. And you might say that there is an agreement between the federal government and the Quebec government that it's more of a loan, not a subsidy, whereas elsewhere it tends to be subsidized programs. And I wonder if there's a difference. Well, yes, I was the former Minister of the Environment, and I think we're talking about two different things. The Infrastructure Bank has expressed interest, but there's also an environmental assessment. And we've talked about the funds that can be accessed. The Minister of Transport and sorry for my French, but it's the Trade Corridor Fund. And I think this would be a question that he could answer better. But I think it's important that we support infrastructure for trade, international trade as well. And I think we could see more opportunities for projects in that context. Thank you very much. But for me, it's important that Quebec get its fair share of the federal investment in projects, and I think it's very important that these projects be funded adequately and appropriately. Currently, we have another problem. You talked about the Infrastructure Bank and the results obtained, but the fact is that the Montreal Airport is an important airport, and there's no more money to improve the airport. The Quebec government has invested $1.2 billion in the REM project, and the link to the Montreal Airport is in a deficit, in fact. And how can we get more funding? Why is this deficit being allowed to happen? Of course, we know that it's difficult to maintain health and transport projects. REM is a very important project, and the government of Quebec has invested heavily. We've also invested through the Infrastructure Bank, and we'll take a look at what we can do together. And it's a very important project, and I think that we have to increase funding for public transport.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being with us today, Minister. I wanted to start with the topic of the climate crisis. I know this is something that you and I share as an urgent concern, and you've spoken quite a bit about climate action being a priority for your department. And yet, looking at the departmental plan for 2020-2021, it really doesn't speak at all to infrastructure's role in meeting Canada's emission reduction targets. I believe there's one line in there. There's a target around having 3.5% of municipalities, quote, enhance their capacity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change as a result of federal funding. But there's no quantification, there's no metrics. With none of these specific measures in the departmental plan, how can Canadians be assured that we're on track to meet the targets with regard to the contribution specifically of infrastructure?
Minister McKenna.
That's a really great question, and thank you very much. Am I still? Thank you very much to the member for raising this. As you know, I'm passionate about action on climate change, and we just announced our net zero legislation. Infrastructure, as I say, either increases emission or reduces them, and it either makes us more or less resilient. We have a climate lens on projects right now. The legislation was actually brought in. It was a private member's bill, as you would know, by my great parliamentary secretary, Andy Fillmore. It only applies to projects $10 million and over. But I certainly agree. We need to be looking from a climate perspective at every single project. So that is something that I'm committed to, and we're looking at instituting. And I also agree that we need to be creating incentives for communities to make the right decision to lower their emissions. And we need to be actually understanding how much they're going to be lowering their emissions. And we need to be looking from a longer term perspective about how we're going to be net zero by 2050. I've talked about the importance of a national infrastructure assessment so that we have a lens to the longer term all the way out so that we are very clear about where we need to be with clear goals along the way.
Mr. Bachrach?
The question was how we're going to know we're on track. And I listened as carefully as I could, and I didn't pick that up. But I'm going to move on to my next topic, which is rural broadband, which you've also spoken a little bit about. This is a really key concern for the region in Northwest BC that I represent. It's a large rural region, as you know very well. The department's goal is to get high-speed internet to 98% of Canadians by 2026. How did the department arrive at that number of 98%?
Mister?
Well, thank you very much for the member first question, and I can certainly sympathize with folks that are having such a challenging time right now in your own riding. That ISID is the lead on broadband, but we do play a supporting role. I mean, I play a supporting role in terms of the Investing in Canada plan. We've invested in invested over $340 million for 11 connectivity projects through the rural and northern stream. We are just but one part, and that requires that provinces and territories actually prioritize broadband over, for example, roads and bridges. That there is also the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which has made $2 billion in new funding available to connect. They've said 750,000 homes and small businesses at least. And that's something I'm going to be following extremely closely because I could not agree more. I think this is actually the biggest infrastructure challenge is actually connecting Canadians as quickly, all Canadians as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bachrach?
Minister, in your departmental plan, you talk about inclusivity, and I'm wondering if this inclusivity includes equity between rural and urban communities. Is that something that is referenced there? And if it is, does your department explicitly measure this dimension of equity?
Minister?
I should say that inclusivity, it is extremely important to me, and we do have community benefits. But it is a different way of looking at inclusivity to include rural people who live in rural areas, and I absolutely agree that that is part of inclusivity. So that's something. Once again, I'm looking at how do we get outcomes in terms of jobs and economic growth. How do we get outcomes in terms of climate action, and how do we get outcomes in terms of inclusivity in designing programs that actually have those goals explicitly where you can measure and track them. We are certainly working on that. And I think you raised an extremely important point. A lot of times people think of inclusivity as LGBTQ plus community or maybe people that from an accessibility, but I think we need to also look at it from a rural urban lens as well.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bachrach?
Okay, so according to your departmental plan, Minister, an important result of public infrastructure is inclusivity and sustainably increased economic growth, yet the only indicator that is listed in the plan is GDP growth. How do you plan to measure inclusivity and sustainability? Like the challenge, and what I'm getting at, is that these words are in the departmental plan, but there are never metrics or specific objectives to give the public any sense that progress is being made towards these goals. How can people have a sense, and I'll come back to my previous question, how can we have any confidence that progress is being made if there are no metrics and there are no quantifiable objectives in the plan, in the departmental plan?
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Minister?
So I think that's a really great point. And so we have been looking at, so our plan, just to be very clear, the way it's structured is that, for example, we have a stream that's called green infrastructure. It is provinces and territories who determine what projects come to us, or community culture and recreation. We get projects that have been submitted by municipalities or other partners to the province. They decide who ends up on my desk. But I do think we need to be looking at that very closely because I agree when we make investments in infrastructure, We need to be making sure that everyone is getting an opportunity to access good infrastructure. And we know we've got an infrastructure deficit in Indigenous communities. We know in racialized communities that there is a deficit often and a gap. And so I think we need to do more. We are looking at, I've talked to the chief statistician to figure out how do we do that better? How do we develop the tools? But I think, as I said, I'm outcomes based. I think that every dollar we spend, every taxpayer dollar needs to reach three outcomes. It has to create jobs in the short term and economic growth in the long term. It needs to tackle climate change, reducing emissions and building more resilient communities, and it needs to build a more inclusive communities for all. So I am looking at how we do that. I am happy to work with the member because I know the member cares about this greatly, to get input from the member on what are the best practices, because I know in British Columbia there's some great initiatives, as well as the city of Toronto has ways of looking at inclusivity. And so I think that that really is the opportunity to make sure that we're getting multiple, triple benefits from every dollar that is spent.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. We're now going to go on to our second round. I have lined up for 5 minutes each. Ms. Kusi, Ms. Jazik, 2.5 minutes each, Mr. Barcelou Devel, Mr. Backrack, and then 5 minutes each, Mr. Cram and Mr. Fillmore. So we're going to start off with Ms. Kusi. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And Minister, good to see you. Finally, we get to do our salutations here after some time. It's nice to see you. And James certainly sends his regards as well. He asks about you from time to time within the House. Minister, you just said something I think which really catches the attention of myself, as well as the opposition, as well as Canadians, that you're outcomes based. And yet your CEO received a performance bonus for zero outcomes. That's a zero outcomes, zero projects completed. That doesn't seem to me to be very outcomes based, that someone would receive a performance bonus, your outgoing CEO, for zero projects completed under the infrastructure ban. I'm not sure if there were other metrics that you used in an attempt to reward him, initiative or motivation or other types of things, but perhaps you can explain to myself, the committee, and Canadians why your outgoing CEO received a performance bonus for zero projects completed under the infrastructure bank.
Thank you, Ms. Kusi. Minister McKenna.
So I should just note, I think this is really important, that the Canada Infrastructure Bank is an arm's length Crown corporation, and it absolutely does need to deliver on its mandate to invest in major nation and building projects. This is something I've been absolutely focused on since I've come in. I'm very pleased that we were able to attract Michael Sabia, the new chair of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, who just announced a $10 billion growth plan. And we now have a new CEO. And the CEO, I note that the CEO's base salary range and performance pay compensation total is 40% lower than previously. And I have high expectations for the CIB and for Mr. Corey. I know they're going to deliver on their mandate to get more infrastructure built across this country, nation building projects that really would never have been built under conservative government that wanted to cancel infrastructure projects from coast to coast to coast. We need to move forward. This is how we are going to grow our economy. Investments in infrastructure are the largest driver of GDP, of growth of our economy, but they're also great jobs, union jobs for Canadians. I talked to the unions about how
Thank you, Minister. I agree with you. See, we're getting along already. We both agree that performance is important.
Ms. Kusi.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Chair. Then I'm going to move on to the Ontario government. In May, the government of Ontario sent you a letter requesting a formal agreement in regards to the subway transit plan for the Greater Ontario area. Yet they have yet to receive a response. That was 6 months ago. When can they receive a response, Minister, in regards to this important plan?
I have many discussions with my counterparts in Ontario, and I think there's a huge opportunity to get public transit built. As I say, we've already spent 13 times the amount that the previous government spent in public transit, and it's key, including in my hometown of Hamilton, where we're really hoping that the Ford government will step up. The union, the union is very keen on this happening. They want to be a partner, the Chamber of Commerce. And so, look, my goal is to get infrastructure built, but what we need to see are business plans. I'm
Well, is
responsible
that
to
so? You're
taxpayer
saying then,
dollars.
Minister, you'll release the funds because both the City of Toronto and York Region is waiting for the $5.1 billion release of funds. Is that a commitment today to release those funds? And I'm glad you brought up business plans, Minister, because it turns out that for both the Express Metropolitan Montreal as well as the Broadway subway in Vancouver, both of those projects apparently did not require business plans. So it seems as though your application process is inconsistent as well. But what I'm hearing you say today is that you are committed to this project and that you're willing to release those funds. So when can they expect the $5.1 billion, Minister?
Minister.
I just want to be clear that I'm responsible for taxpayer dollars, that we need to see business plans. We need to understand costing. That's critically important. I'm not going to apologize to that to Conservative members who I assume would want to make sure that that's exactly
But you didn't
what we're
require
doing.
it for the Express Metropolitan of Montreal or the Broadway subway in Vancouver. So, you know, there seems to be some consistency because it seems to me here we're agreeing that important business practices being consistent is important, and yet that doesn't seem to have been the case. And you know, I'm very glad that you've brought up that the federal government is willing to do their part because both the provincial and the municipal funding commitments are there. And so I'm just asking you, Minister, if you can commit to providing your funding, the $5.1 billion from the federal government that is desperately needed to finish this project today, because it sounds like we're both in line here in terms of expecting performance, wanting results, commitment to better transit, and committing these funds to projects that benefit Canadians. Can you make a commitment to release the funds today,
Minister.
please?
Look, we're working very closely with the government of Ontario to understand the numbers. I know my deputy can talk about her good, very strong relationship with her counterpart in Ontario. But once again, we are responsible for taxpayer dollars. That I believe that it is on me to make sure that we have plans, that we are very clear about how these investments are going to go. But I am keen on getting more public transit built. We've invested 13 times what the previous government invested. You know, you are the Conservative government, and
Then release the money. Let it flow.
But I just am surprised. Would you like me to release the money? Should I just give money to people without holding them accountable?
Well, apparently you did that
Okay,
in
thank you,
Montreal
members.
and in
We are now
Vancouver
going to
in
have to go on
support
to the
of
next
transit.
speaker. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Kusi.
Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. We're now going to go on to Ms. Jezik. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here with your officials. And it seems like Ms. Kusi and I are often on the same wavelength, because I was going to ask you to highlight some of the investments that we have made since 2015 in public transit. She mentioned a couple. Perhaps you could fill us in on the range of investments in public transit that the Ministry of Infrastructure has actually made to date.
So that's great, because I think it is really important to talk about. I said 13 times. It's actually good because it's $13 billion that we have invested in public transit since we were elected. And just a reminder that Conservatives ran on a platform to cut $18 billion in infrastructure spending. So maybe that was all of the public transit investments that we've made wouldn't actually get built. But let's talk about the transit hub in Brampton, Ontario. I was just making an announcement with the mayor of Brampton. He is so excited about this transit hub and how this is going to transform Brampton and get more people around faster in more affordable ways, in cleaner ways. The transit hub in the Cowichan Valley in BC, projects like electric school buses and charging infrastructure in Charlottetown, Milton, Durham Region, Kawartha Lakes, Kingston, St. Thomas, Oakville, Waterloo, Stratford, Guelph. I could go on. Since coming to office at the end of 2015, we have invested more than $13.3 billion in public transit projects across the country, 13 times more than the previous government that only invested $1 billion. And look, I like the ambition of provinces like Ontario. I want to get more public transit built. I want to get more public transit built in Hamilton. I think that we need to be moving forward. I've heard from Jerry Diaz. He said that it's so important that we get the streetcars for Toronto because that's good jobs, Bombardier jobs in Thunder Bay. And I think that's what this is about. Why? This is the triple benefits I spend so much time talking about. Public transit, jobs, Canadian supply chain, electric buses, but streetcars, economic growth. Largest driver of economic growth is investments in infrastructure. Climate action. When we talk about public transit, when we talk about electric buses, that makes a huge impact in reducing emissions. And of course, inclusivity, because who is taking public transit? Often our essential workers that we have seen in the pandemic depend on public transit. People that do not have access to vehicles, they cannot afford vehicles. Young people who don't even want cars. I found that out for my kids. They never want to have a car. They just want to get around on public transit. So this is really the opportunity. And this is how we're going to build a better country, a cleaner country, a country with good jobs where it is inclusive for all.
Ms.
Thank you
Jazik?
very much, Minister. If I could turn, in fact, to the Yonge North Subway, I represent a riding in York Region, and this is an extremely important project to all the members in York Region, both the government and opposition, of course. You talk about the need for a business plan, and as someone who's extremely familiar with the topography, as an example, of the potential route, that is a very hilly part of York Region, as an example, I can only imagine that there's a need for a very close examination of the potential routes, the options that are available, underground, overground, etc. Could you just sort of elaborate a little bit on your need for that detail, level of detail that you require from the province?
Minister?
Well, thanks very much for the question. And I should start by saying we're already supporting the Yonge North subway extension. That we've done so by providing funding for preliminary engineering into York Region. So this is a project that I think is a really good project. But of course, we need to look at, as you say, where is the route going to be? Just details about the costs. And just a full business case, which is just a requirement because in the end, I have to go like the province of Ontario has to do. I have to go to my treasury board and justify every dollar, which we should. We need to be accountable. These are taxpayer dollars. So we've been really encouraging the province to give us the business case for this project, to really help us understand, our government to understand, so that we can make sure that we're accountable to taxpayers while moving ahead on a project that that would be great. And it's just so interesting. I'm not very used to conservatives attacking liberals for being prudent about taxpayer dollars. I am someone who believes we need to be fiscally responsible, but we've got to be ambitious on infrastructure. It seems that the conservatives don't want to be fiscally responsible, and we know they don't really want to invest in infrastructure. So it's kind of the opposite. But look, we support the Yonge subway extension. We've said so extensively on the public record, really up to the province to get its ducks in a row, get us the information we need to do a proper funding evaluation so we can get this project underway.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Thank you, Ms. Jazik. We're now going to move on for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Barcelona-Val, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, earlier in your presentation, you were referred to the Port of Montreal, and when I asked you a question about the gas tax fund, you said maybe Quebec should put in more. So I think that my question is, since we now have a project which Infrastructure Canada is associated with, it's the high-speed train for Quebec-Windsor, and in the documents that have been made public, it seems that there's a recommendation that we drop the Montreal-Quebec part of the high-speed train. And I wonder if there's really a concrete commitment from your government that there will be a project and that Montreal-Quebec will be part of it, and whether I'm right. So when I talk about the Quebec and the investment, I think Quebec is an important partner. I understand their jurisdiction. I think a high-speed train is a very important piece of infrastructure. We have to decide where it's going to go, what its path will be, what the cost will be. And I think it would be wonderful to have access to this kind of train. And it's something that we're studying, and we'll take decisions in the coming months. Thank you. But does your government commit to the Montreal-Quebec section? I don't think that. I think we'll start with the historic investments in infrastructure we've made across the country, including in Quebec. And when we talk about public transit and the infrastructure bank has made tremendous investments, and that shows how important it is to work with the Quebec government. And I believe that but I would really like you to answer my question. The reports of the PBO are very clear that Quebec is getting underinvestment from the federal government in these types of projects. And I'd like to know whether you are going to fund or not, and do you guarantee that Montreal-Quebec will be part of this project? Of course, there are studies underway with the high-speed train. We've invested a great deal in Quebec in many projects, and we will continue to evaluate the projects and to invest. But I've spent a lot of time in Quebec, and I think infrastructure in Quebec is very important for the economy, for improve communities, and we will continue to do so.
5 minutes with Mr. Bacharach. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I'd like to come back to one of my previous questions around rural broadband. And in the question that I asked previously, you deferred to the industry minister, and it reminded me of a report that was tabled at the Heritage Committee back, I believe it was in January or February, Canada's Communications Future, Time to Act. And there was a specific mention in that report, in the section around rural broadband, that said that the lack of a single minister in charge of the rural broadband file is something that is potentially holding back progress on that issue. Who is in charge of delivering rural broadband?
So I think that's a really great question. And in fact, that when you look at our rural broadband fund, and I must correct myself, we actually didn't put in $1.5 billion. We put $1.75 billion. So we enhanced the fund, but we also increased coordination. For a number of reasons, there are that with provinces and territories, they asked through our Investing in Canada plan that broadband be one of the opportunities under rural and northern, but not exclusively. So it's up to them to decide. Then ISED has a significant role to play. The Canada
so Minister, the question was
very specific. So you want to have the bank doing something different, which is actually leveraging the private sector, and the CRTC is independent.
Just
so
in the interest of time, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bacharach.
The question was, which minister is accountable for delivering the outcomes that you've promised around rural broadband? Is there a minister that is accountable for that? Which minister is the lead?
All the ministers that have within their portfolio aspects of broadband are accountable, and ultimately our government is accountable. And Canadians will hold us accountable. Let me tell you that we have heard from Canadians how important investments in broadband. That is why we're accelerating our investments in broadband. That's why we've increased the amount of money that's being invested in broadband. That's why the bank is providing $2 billion in funds. And as I say that, they're looking at over 750,000 homes. I'm going to hold them accountable to that. And we need to get that done quickly. And I should point out for anyone that might be watching, Canadians, that up to $150 million of the funds under the recently announced Universal Broadband Fund will be available immediately right now for rapid response for projects that can be completed in the 2021 build season.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bacharach.
The challenge is that with no single minister accountable, it's difficult to hold the government accountable for the outcomes that it's promised. I want to move on, Minister, to one more question around the electric buses. And talking to the electric bus sector, one of the key challenges in delivering the 5,000 bus target is the lack of a funding stream specifically for cities to fund feasibility studies to ensure that they're using and implementing the technology effectively. Are you aware of this concern? And if so, how is your government planning to address it?
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Quickly, Minister McKenna.
So thank you very much. I've learned a lot actually about electric buses and how it's not just the buses that you need to be invested in the charging infrastructure. And I have heard about the need for feasibility studies. There are some opportunities through the FCM, but I mean, this is something we need to look at because of course we need to be supporting municipalities so that they have the capacity to do what we've committed to do with them, which is 5,000 electric buses.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, Minister.
We're now going to move on to 5 minutes. I believe this 5-minute frame is going to be split between Mr. Cram and Mr. Shipley. Mr. Cram, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I will be splitting my time today with my colleague, Mr. Shipley. And thank you, Minister McKenna, for joining us today at the committee. 2 months ago, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe sent a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau outlining some of my province's concerns with the federal government. I would like to follow up on one of those issues today. In terms of infrastructure, only 3 municipal projects in Saskatchewan have been given funding by your government since March 1st. Can you tell us if this number is still accurate?
Minister.
Well, I mean, it's good to look over my deputy. I mean, once again, with our infrastructure program, what is critical is we actually receive projects from the province. That's how our program works. They have to hit my desk, and then we have to do a review of the projects. We've been encouraging Saskatchewan and working with them to have more projects. I'm going to actually, you know what, Kelly, you can just, my deputy is right here. She can speak to the number of projects that that we've approved and
thank you, Minister.
You know, the answer
Ms.
to the
Gillis.
question.
Certainly. Thank you very much for the question. So to date, we've approved 375 projects in Saskatchewan. So 25 under the IBA, 5 under disaster mitigation adaptation, and 1 under the Smart Cities Challenge. So also from budget 2016, under the Public Transit and Infrastructure Fund, there was 14. Under Clean Water, Wastewater, 110. And with our Innovation for Climate Change, 8, and Asset Management, 106. So a number of projects valued at $716 million have been funded and approved for your province.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Cram.
All right, and thank you. And as I said, I will be sharing my time with my colleague, Mr. Shipley. I don't want to eat into his time, so I will hand it over to him.
Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. Minister, earlier today you mentioned that the Infrastructure Bank is an independent arm's length agency. If this is accurate, how is it that you, the Minister, can be present when the bank announced a new growth plan filled with politically motivated projects?
Thank you. Before I go to Minister McKenna, if you can just hold on a second. Mr. Shipley, if you can pull your mic just a bit up. You're popping a bit, a little bit down right there. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shipley. Mr. McKenna.
Don't want to pop.
Mr. McKenna, the floor is yours.
Okay. So the Canada Infrastructure Bank is independent, but our government sets the overarching priorities for the bank. They're extremely broad priorities. And when you look at their growth plan, they developed a plan that reflected those priorities. They looked at, and I think it's to be applauded that Michael Sabia, the new chair, worked with the board, with the staff of the bank to come across, to look at what areas would make a difference in the shorter term. So the bank has overarching priorities, including public transit, transmission lines, other things that it's working on. But it said, okay, what can we do in the shorter term that will create jobs now that'll also make a big difference in the pandemic? So let's just talk about broadband, the importance of connecting Canadians to broadband. They are committing now to connect in the shorter term 750,000 of homes and businesses to broadband. So I think that's an example of them looking at opportunities, which I hope you would agree that are really important because I hear from Canadians how important it is to be investing in broadband. Also, it's great to see that the first project actually was an Albertan project, so that the bank working with Premier Kenney to do a project is going to make a real difference in irrigation. That this is about about farmers, this is about ranchers, this is about the ag tech sector, it's about Canadian exports. I certainly applaud this because I think we have to be more ambitious. We have to invest more in infrastructure, and we need to be doing it while working in hand with the private sector.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Shipley?
Thank you, Minister. So one final question on the infrastructure bank. Pre-pandemic, the bank allocated billions of dollars and completed no projects. But now you have re-announced this bank with a more political mandate. But once again, it seems like you were just expecting us to trust you on this. Why should we trust you to complete in the future what you couldn't complete in the past?
Mr. McKenna?
I'm not entirely sure what that means, but look, the infrastructure bank is doing really good work. As I said, it announced a project that I think that Premier Kenney was extremely pleased with. That it will make a real difference when it comes to irrigation in Alberta. That when you look at the REM project in Montreal, that's an incredible project, and I know I hear from Montrealers, they're so excited to see that it's actually being built and creating thousands of jobs. The infrastructure bank's role is actually looking at where are there opportunities for investment, where can they attract the private sector on projects, how do they do that? And I think I have great faith in Michael Sabia, the new CEO of the bank. Aaron Corey comes from Infrastructure Ontario, where he has a lot of experience leveraging private sector and looking at innovative financing tools. So I think that there's a huge opportunity. And it's great to see, as I say, interest by conservative premiers and actually moving forward and getting more infrastructure built.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Thank you, Mr. Cram. And thank you, Mr. Shipley. We're now going to go on to our final frame of 5 minutes with Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, the floor is yours. You're on. I think you're on mute, Andy. Andy, pull your boom down on your mic. There you go. Still can't hear you, Andy.
I'm not going to lower the
there
boom.
You go.
Minister,
there you go.
Worry. Okay, I'll lower my own boom. Thanks for being here, Minister. It's wonderful to have you here to talk with us about the infrastructure program. I want to ask you about broadly the impacts of the infrastructure program that you are managing at the moment. I'd like to ask you about the under two headings. First is the impact on climate change, on severe weather, on GHG reductions, the impact on our ability to reach our 2050 net zero targets. And we'll go to there first. But secondarily, I'd like to ask you if we have time about the economic benefits in communities across the country. But if we could start with the environmental and climate and carbon impacts, if you would.
Well, thank you very much. And I have a great parliamentary secretary, I must say, to everyone who cares greatly about climate change, who actually brought in private members bill, which is hard to get passed, but it passed in the House, setting up a climate lens. So climate change really is, as we think of the infrastructure bill, critically important. It's interesting because when you look at the opportunities, I made an announcement about a net zero pool, the Drayton Valley pool. And the amount of excitement in relation to that pool is huge, and it's just an example of how we can make a real difference. That investment, kind of seems like not a big deal, but for that community, it's actually using heating, I think, from the local arena for the pool. Like, that's just smart. But I've seen these investments across the country that are reducing emissions. Which are critically important, and that's electric buses, that's investments in renewable energy, in district heating, something I know you care greatly about, active transportation, and linking that to public transportation, thinking about cycling as a way that people get to and from work, which often we haven't thought of it like that, as just a pastime. And we are also building resilience because, unfortunately, climate change is already having a huge impact on communities. So, as I say, the investment we made in Brampton under a disaster adaptation mitigation fund is really critically important. But look, I think that there are many other opportunities. And as we look to move forward, what I would like to see are more more opportunities directly with cities and municipalities, big and small across the country. We have seen leadership from municipalities on climate change, and I say that in every province and territory across the country. That emissions, 40% of emissions, it's estimated, are within control of municipalities. So we certainly need to be enabling them to make the decisions that are going to really help reduce emissions and ensure cleaner air and cleaner water in their communities, but also a better quality of life for people. And when you look at the impacts of having better public transit, or the impacts of having district heating, or more cycling paths, or more access to nature, we haven't talked a lot about natural infrastructure, that makes a real practical difference in people's lives while creating good union jobs. And I got to emphasize this, that I think there's just so much opportunity as we are trying to build our way, build Canada up, also building our way out of this pandemic, making sure that we're making investments that are creating good union jobs right now. I hear from unions across the country, and I have to give a shout out to all the construction workers that have been working hard throughout this pandemic to keep that sector open and get things built in a safe way.
Mr. Fillmore?
We have another minute or two, Chair?
Yes, you have about a minute and a half.
Okay, great. Well, then you began to make the segue there into the economy, and you and I speak often about the fact that this infrastructure program is a chance, given its magnitude, is not just a chance to move the dial on the environment, but also to move the dial on the economy and employment. And particularly now with COVID, even more so. Can you talk a little bit and sort of go down that path a little bit about the economic impact as it relates to our recovery, but even beyond that, just in general, about creating prosperity in our communities across the country?
Minister?
Well, I think that's really important. I mean, we need to be making sure right now that we're creating good jobs, but also growing our economy. And let's just take some stats. I'm someone who really cares about stats. That in 2019 alone, if you look at the construction industry, it accounted for approximately 7% of Canada's GDP and employed about 1.7 million Canadians. We know that the infrastructure investments are a significant part of our economy, and that every investment that we're making, in every public investment in infrastructure, by 1% of GDP boosts growth by 2.7%. And if you look at investments in traditional infrastructure, an investment of $1 million generates between 2 and 8 jobs. So that's water treatment facilities, bridges, storm sewers. But when you go to clean infrastructure like public transit, more energy efficient buildings, the payoff's even bigger, between 5 and 14 jobs for every $1 million spent. I could talk about all the different projects that are creating jobs. The mayor of Brampton talked about the tens of thousands of jobs that will be created with the investment that we made in flood mitigation in Brampton alone. So if you think about all these projects across the country creating good local jobs, I think that's really the real opportunity. And we know we need jobs. We're in the largest recession since the Great Depression, and we have to make sure that we're creating good jobs for Canadians and building the cleaner, more inclusive future we want.
Thank you, Minister McKenna. Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. That ends the first hour, the first session. I want to thank Minister McKenna for being here with us today. Great work by all of you. Great questions. We're now going to suspend for a few minutes so we can change over to the next hour, which I am expecting department officials. With that, we will suspend for about 3 minutes.
Thank you all. Bye. Stay healthy and safe.
this afternoon with this meeting with the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. We are going to start the second hour off with 6 minutes to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer, you have the floor. You're on mute, Andrew. There you go.
Sorry about that. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials. Appreciate your time today. Just want to point out a couple of things from the minister's comments. I believe I heard her say that one of the reasons why the Young extension couldn't be approved right now is because they don't know where the line is going to go. So I just wanted to let you know that I found the line. It took about 2 seconds on a Google search. We found the proposed route, and I'm happy to send that along to the minister. Maybe that will speed up the approvals process. I wanted to clarify another one of the minister's responses to my colleague, Mr. Cram. Premier Moe did send a letter just before the throne speech where he indicated that since March 1st, only 3 projects approved, and the official answered that gave a different number. Just wondering if you could bring some clarity to that. Were there a whole bunch of new approvals done in the last few weeks?
Ms. Gillis?
Hi. So certainly, and just for all of our approvals, for each of our streams within the integrated bilateral agreements, we actually do post them on online, and it's available on our website. So for the integrated bilateral agreements, I do have 25 projects that have been approved and announced.
That's
for
since March 1st?
151. I can ask some of my officials to look at the exact dates. I don't have them in front of me right now, but I do know that 25 have been approved and announced for $151,880,000. And so far, there's been $14,691 claimed. So that hasn't been since March 1st, but it's been through the integrated bilateral agreements.
Right. As you know, those agreements go back some time, and I think what the Premier's point was
so
that
these are the IBAs for the $33 billion that we've actually have active right now. So it's our most recent program.
Right.
For the remaining ones that I did quote, some of them from before, that you're correct. They were from the first round of integrated bilateral agreements from 2016 budget.
Mr. Scheer?
So those 25 are from the more recent one.
I believe the Premier's point that since March 1st, there were 123 proposed, only 3 received approval. And when you're talking about a construction season in Saskatchewan that doesn't go too deep into the winter, I think that's the issue that was being highlighted. I wanted to ask you a question. There's been numerous reports about trying to quantify the percentage of infrastructure dollars that go to what are traditionally considered actual infrastructure, types of roads, bridges, and ports, and water systems. And many analyses have shown that what is considered social infrastructure, some spending on things that have traditionally not been included in the infrastructure envelope, that may be worthwhile initiatives, maybe filling needs, but usually those have been captured in other areas. And there's a sense that this government is trying to call a lot of things infrastructure to give it that label, to give the sense that this type of spending does have return on investment in terms of economic growth. Does the department have any type of criteria that determines the different types of infrastructure spending that it approves, breaking down social versus what we might consider more traditional infrastructure projects?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So when we look at our programming right now under the integrated bilateral agreements, where I would say the social type of infrastructure, which we have traditionally funded, is under the community culture and rec stream. So it is an overall allocation, a national allocation of $1.3 billion. And at this point in time, we have 155 projects that have been approved for almost $400 million across the country. Now, we have just recently, because of the pandemic, created something called the COVID stream. And I know that the minister briefly mentioned that, where based in the $33 billion, provinces and territories can transfer up to 10% of their allocation. And a couple of the eligible categories, such as retrofits and upgrades, as well as pandemic resiliency, do go into more a broader definition of social infrastructure. So any buildings that are owned by provinces, territories, or municipalities, such as hospitals, schools, or long-term care facilities, would be eligible under that stream. Now, normally that's more under provincial jurisdiction or territorial jurisdiction, so we don't fund those types of infrastructures, but we do, and we have for many years funded community culture and recreation infrastructure. The other streams are more public transit, wastewater, renewable energy types of programming, as well as in our rural and northern stream, we do have 18 different categories, but not in normal social infrastructure, as you might be talking about right now.
When
I hope that clarifies.
Thank you. When the department, when the minister and the prime minister make claims about the effects on GDP, does the department do an analysis to determine whether or not there's the same type of benefit with social infrastructure spending as more traditional infrastructure?
So within Infrastructure Canada, we use, and Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. What we do is we use the macro accounts from Statistics Canada, and that is the model for economic analysis and benefit that we use, which is a standard methodology within the federal government.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis, and thank you, Mr. Scheer. We'll now go on to Mr. Fillmore for 6 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to the officials for being here with us. Excuse me, with us today. I wonder if you could tell us what is INFC, what is the Department of Infrastructure looking for in terms of detail for a project? You know, what is the due diligence and rigor that is undertaken in order to release the funds before we can start to fund a project in order to do this responsibly?
Ms. Gillis?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Now, for that particular question, it depends on the type of project. If we are doing a project that requires a Treasury Board submission, so at this point in time, we have just over anything under $100 million does not require Treasury Board submission. Anything over $100 million, we are required to go to Treasury Board. And for that, we need a full business case of understanding schedule, costing, risk, environmental assessment, duty to consult, understanding the outcomes of what that particular project is going to attain and how it actually aligns to the terms and conditions of the particular program. The ask that it has within the allocation as well, because as we've got integrated bilateral agreements right now with provinces and territories, and all of those amounts are public, the province has to determine how much they want to use of that allocation for that particular project. And so when we're doing a Treasury Board submission, it is a full, quite substantive business case, similar to what would be undertaken within a province or a territory. But if there's a project that is under $100 million and it requires the minister's authority, then for each particular program, there's a set amount of data that's required to determine eligibility and alignment with the terms and conditions. And with our integrated bilateral agreements, we've created a portal, and it's very clear on kind of the data sets that are required where a Treasury Board submission is not required.
Mr. Fillmore?
Okay, thanks very much for that answer. And as you know, Deputy Minister, my background as a city planner for several decades, I understand the complexities of large-scale infrastructure projects and the detailed planning and business cases that are required to proceed, so that they're not throwing money away, but rather it's money being invested wisely. You mentioned the IBAs. Let's just go there for a moment, if we could. Now, the ICIP program has these complex and negotiated bilateral agreements that respect the authority and jurisdiction of the provinces, and also respect their knowledge about knowing what their priorities are on the ground in those respective provinces. What is the role? Can you just tell us about the role of the provinces as we release money to these infrastructure projects across the country?
Certainly, Chair, and thank you for the question. So as you articulated, the integrated bilateral agreements are about national outcomes, but respecting local priority setting. So once the integrated bilateral agreements have been signed and agreed to with all provinces and territories, which for the IBAs for the $33 billion, they are, then each province and territory is creating, because there is a cost sharing element to this, their own programs their own intake processes within their jurisdiction and determining how that would go forward, as well as then when they receive the projects, prioritizing which projects would be coming forward to us. So each province within each stream is determining the time frame of when they are actually opening their intake processes. They are making the evaluation of which projects should proceed, the determination of how much of their allocation will be used for each project, and then submitting to us the application. And at that point in time, once we receive the complete application, then we review it for due diligence from the various components, as I mentioned, for the data inputs, and if there's a requirement for such things like a climate lens, so that it's completed at the appropriate time. And then we put the application up for the ministerial approval. And if it's over $100 million, it would be a more collaborative process for the information that would be required to submit a Treasury Board submission to our Treasury Board.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis.
Okay.
Mr. Fillmore?
Thank you. Are we done, Chair?
No, you have about a minute and a half.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you, Deputy Minister. And of course, the journey of a project from the municipal proponent through the provincial government, through its prioritization process, up to the due diligence required with infrastructure is a necessarily detailed one, because of course we're in the business of accountability and getting good projects built. So thanks for that description. In the time we have left, I'd like to turn to transit and active transportation. And I wonder if you could characterize the experience of the Department of Infrastructure's increased demand and, I guess, surface area with the world of active transportation, and you know how that landscape is changing in terms of demand and the projects that we're seeing.
Certainly, I think active transportation is an area that we are, especially during this pandemic, seeing the import increasing. And within our COVID stream that I mentioned before, there are certain eligible categories. That active transportation is we've put in as an eligible category. And for that particular stream, we are actually paying 80 cents on the dollar. So we can, support hopefully more active transportation coming through. But it is subject to the same process where provinces and territories have an intake process and prioritize projects to us. But within our funding so far within active transportation, we have funded, for example, 225 kilometers of bike paths and a number of the supporting infrastructure that goes with it. So it has been something that has been, seen as an important infrastructure for the well-being and health of Canadians.
Thank you, Mr.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis, and thank you, Mr. Fillmore. We're now going to move on for 6 minutes to Mr. Barcelou-Deville. Mr. Barcelou-Deville, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question for Ms. Gillis, I'd like to know since last year you've authorized, could you tell us what proportion of infrastructure investment has been given to Quebec with regard to the rest of Canada? Thank you very much for the question. To date, for Quebec, for our recent programs, we've approved 1,140 projects for a value of $6.5 billion. And for current projects in the integrated bilateral agreements, the allocation is $7.5 billion. We have 289 programs approved and announced for approximately $3 billion. Those are the amounts currently for Quebec. What's the proportion or in relation to the rest of Canada? Do you have the figures? I don't have that, but we can provide it to you after the meeting. Thank you. That would be most helpful. My next question, the infrastructure bank has existed for how long? The act was adopted in 2017, following which we created the organization and made it operational. And in 2019, when we hired the first CEO. And how many CEOs have there been for the infrastructure bank since it was created? The second has just been announced, Mr. Corey from Infrastructure Ontario. Is there any reason why the previous CEO left, who had been there for about a year? I don't know if were any reasons. It seems unusual that he should be replaced so quickly after the beginning of his mandate. I don't know whether was he not a good choice or were there any other reasons. So we were surprised about the effect that would have on the stability of the functioning of the organization. Thank you for the question. The bank is an independent body with an independent board of directors, which manages the bank. I can't really make any comment on decisions made by the board or with regard to the management of the bank or the personalities involved. My next question is the projects in which you've invested or the bank has invested are projects managed or suggested by municipalities, provinces. Have you any examples of any other types of investments other than public investments? And we are not really in favor of a privatization of infrastructure. And why is the bank necessary to, if there could have been private financing for some of these projects? Thank you for the question. The bank is a model adopted by the government to increase investment in infrastructure for the benefit of Canadians. It's a model that's owned by the public or for the public. And it is intended to complement private infrastructure investment. That doesn't really answer my question, but thank you for your answer. I understand if you can't really discuss of the pertinence of the bank, but now I would like to ask with the COVID and the problems caused in many regions, including Quebec. What has the government done to improve internet access, for example?
There was the last part of that question was not coming through my microphone.
Mr. Backrack, I'm sorry, Mr. Barcelona-Duval.
Yes, I just wanted to know what your government has done to increase internet access in the recent months.
Ms. Gillis?
Merci pour les questions.
Thank you very much for the question. As the minister said, a few weeks ago, a new internet broadband fund has been announced of $1.75 billion to improve high-speed internet connections across the country. And for us at Infrastructure Canada, we've approved 11 projects for $340 million.
Val, we're now going to move on for 6 minutes to Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Gillis, for being here today. My first question relates to something I was asking the minister about, and this is the contribution of infrastructure to our climate ambitions. And we have the climate lens, which assesses in a very quantitative way emissions from projects worth over $10 million. I'm wondering about accountability. So where does this all roll up? And why are there no targets related to that? Since we have this quantitative evaluation mechanism, why are there no targets around emissions reductions in the departmental plan?
Thank you for the question. And so when we're looking at attainment of our climate lens and our climate objectives, there are different tools that we are using, and you mentioned the climate lens, which has been one of the tools that we've recently created to allow for a tool to understand the opportunity and build that into the project kind of analysis process. And through that, it has kind of two volets. It has both the GHG portion of it as well as the resilience portion of it. And it has been used right now to almost 90% of our approved project values. So that is helpful. And we do have a national target on our infrastructure programming overall, which is 10 megatons. At this point in time, based on our attainment of the climate lens, we're just over 2 megatons. And we have still, at 2/3 of our funding to be expended and against projects. There are other tools that we have in place to help us attain our targets. We're working with the National Research Council on new building codes. We're working with the Standards Council on standards, and we're working with the FCM on supporting climate plans and providing capacity within municipalities to have more awareness and expertise as they think about asset management. So I don't think that it's just one tool. I think all of them have to actually come together. And as we look to the future, what more needs to be done?
Mr. Bachrach?
Thanks, Ms. Gillis. Along those same lines, is the 10 megaton target, is that a net reduction? I guess what I'm getting at is some of the investments made in infrastructure actually increase emissions. Are those increases netted out to arrive at the net reduction, or are you simply counting projects that reduce emissions, not the ones that increase emissions?
So for the 10 megatons, it's calculated right now in using the climate lens for those particular projects that are subject to it. And we will be looking at overall, how do we, as we go forward with our climate plans, to continue to learn and to do better, and what new tools may be in place, including right now, assessing the climate lens and how it needs to evolve for the future.
So I'm still not clear. My apologies. Is it a net? Like the climate lens tells you the implications for emissions. Some projects increase emissions, some decrease emissions. Is the 2 megatons that you talked about that we've already achieved, is that a net of 2 megatons, or is that something else?
I will have to get back to you on whether it is a net or if it is just taking into consideration the ones that we are doing.
Okay.
I believe it is.
No, I'd really appreciate that. The next question is on a slightly different topic, and I mentioned to the minister this interest in the equity and infrastructure investment between rural and urban communities, rural and urban parts of Canada. Is that something that your department specifically keeps track of, that you specifically measure to ensure that equity?
So what we do have is our rural and northern stream, which is $2 billion across the country. And then we have investments that are being made on that rural stream right now. and it's quite broad, the types of investments. So far, we're about halfway through that particular stream in the approved projects, about $1 billion worth for just over 400 projects. So that is, I think, a really important component because it's quite a flexible stream where rural communities can determine really what their priorities are and what their needs are for their infrastructure investments. Now, that doesn't preclude investments in other streams that actually support rural communities. And that is a really important component of how we look at infrastructure going forward. And overall, recently within our programming, we've got about $10 billion that has been to invested in communities under 30,000 population. And even our disaster mitigation program that the minister had mentioned, almost half of it has gone to rural communities. So as we look at investments, there is important ones that are being made in rural Canada. But as I mentioned before, when Mr. Fillmore was asking about the process, the actual projects and the prioritization is made by provinces and territories to us, and we look at eligibility. So we have another aspect of this, although it's not rural specifically, but the community employment benefits, where we do look at 9 different population groups to see how some of our programs can benefit them.
Right.
Mr. Beckrek?
And it's purely out of curiosity. It's not meant to be a gotcha question, but I'm curious whether your department tracks the proportion of investment that goes to rural communities as a percentage of the overall infrastructure spend, and whether you have a sense of whether the overall infrastructure spend is equitable between rural Canada and urban Canada. Is that something that has come up in your department? Is it something that gets tracked? I haven't been able to find any reference to it anywhere.
It's not. Thank you very much for the question. It's not tracked in that way. It is specifically tracked, obviously, in the rural and northern stream because it's dedicated to rural and northern communities. But in looking at our programming overall, there is the other streams, as I mentioned, also support rural communities, as well as something that is very important is the gas tax, which also goes to a number of communities, including rural communities across the country.
Do you have time for one more?
Thank you, Ms. Gillis,
Okay.
and
Thanks
you,
very
Mr.
much, Ms.
Bachrach.
Gillis.
We're now going to move on to the second round, which starts off with Mrs. Soroka for 5 minutes. Mrs. Soroka, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gillis, broadband is a big issue for me in my riding. And with the Universal Broadband Fund, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, I know the Canada Infrastructure Bank, it seems like it's more about loans than it is actually about grants available. So my question is, when municipalities or organizations are applying, are they going to be able to receive grants or these loans? As well as then, can they partner with other organizations such as Indigenous community groups to sort of get different areas of grants available to them from different programs, or do they have to apply just from one?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So for broadband overall, with the new broadband program that was announced of $1.75 billion, that is an opportunity to get grants. That is a granting program. And as we're looking at the Canada Infrastructure Bank, where they've, within their growth plan, put $2 billion, it is, not a granting program. So they are looking at opportunities to how do they leverage all of the programs to get as much done as possible to meet the target for 2026. And so communities should be looking at, and we will be coordinating within the federal government between the departments that fund broadband to make sure that we're maximizing the availability of the funding to do as much as we can. So it does not limit, municipalities just to go to one, and we actually coordinate within ourselves. So we can look at what is the best opportunity for that particular community.
Okay, that's great. Now, I know I'm going to switch gears here a bit with, you're talking about electrifying public transit, getting more electric buses and private electric vehicles on the road. But my concern is with electricity. I don't believe there's enough generating electricity out there, as well as then the distribution, such as power lines and also charging stations. Do you have a plan to go along with how you're switching to more of a green tech economy with electricity?
So thank you very much for the question. So, within transmission and electrification, we work very closely with our partner departments, the Natural Resources Canada department, who are the lead for the energy sector. But our green stream does fund transmission lines, renewable energy types of projects. And so we've done an important one in BC for Peace Region. And so we are looking at, and if provinces and territories do prioritize those types of projects, they are certainly eligible within the integrated bilateral agreements within the green stream. So it is an important component to move forward.
Yeah, I'm also curious, with electric generation, the provinces are starting with small funding modular reactors to generate electricity from in Ontario, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick are already developing them. Could you give me your thoughts on nuclear generation then on these small projects?
So for us within Infrastructure Canada, we fund projects that are going to be operational and generating energy in the communities right now. That type of technology is, in development and would be, looking at it through Natural Resource Canada on how that might be coming into operation in the future. Once it is in operation and can actually provide energy, that could be something in the future that may be supported by our type of programming, but it is not in operation right now.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Soroka? Mr. Soroka, you get the floor still.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you said thank you, I thought my time was done.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. On the infrastructure bank, the government claimed that the infrastructure spending would increase the GDP by just 0.3%. But in fact, the PBO estimates that it was just 1%, a shortfall of 67%. Could you please explain where the 0.3% increase in GDP comes from?
So I don't know that reference offhand by the Canada Infrastructure Bank, so I can get back to you. I do know that when we are looking at GDP or jobs numbers, we use the macroeconomic accounts from Statistics Canada. But I'd have to look at what that particular reference is regarding the PBO and the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Okay, well, Statistics Canada's own infrastructure economic account shows that there has been almost no increase in infrastructure spending under the current government. The PBO has shown that the provincial capital spending was 5.4 billion lower than it should have been during the years of the Liberal Infrastructure Bank. Again, the figures aren't adding up right. You're talking about spending 53 billion in the last 3 years, and we're hearing no projects have been completed. And now Statistics Canada is actually showing or saying that infrastructure spending has decreased.
So if and I'll re-reference these, but in looking at the InfraHub on Statistics Canada, public sector infrastructure has increased 19.5% from $51.9 billion to $62.04 billion in 2009, where private sector infrastructure investments have stayed relatively steady at 4.5. So public sector infrastructure has significantly increased since 2015. And that is on their infrastructure hub. And I'd be happy to provide the committee with the source of information for those particular metrics.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Mr. Soroka. We're now going to move on for 5 minutes with Mr. Fillmore. Mr. Fillmore, you got the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much for that, and thank you, Deputy Minister. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the larger transit projects that we're seeing in the country. In terms of, I think that, you mentioned the elevated levels of oversight required for projects over, I think the benchmark was it $100 million?
Correct. It's $100 million right now until the end of 21, but previously it was 50 million. And after the end of 21, we will go back down to $50 million where a Treasury Board submission will be required.
Okay. I'm going to change my mind. And I think given what's happening across the country right now with surging COVID numbers, I think that what folks might be more interested in hearing about is the new COVID stream and how that is rolling out. And if you could just talk about the details of the funding allotments that were created for that and what kind of early uptake you might be seeing from provinces. and what kind of criteria there are for those projects.
Thank you for the question. So the COVID stream was created to be able to adjust our programming to be relevant in living with COVID in the times that we are right now. So provinces and territories have the option. They do not have to actually avail themselves of this opportunity to transfer up to 10% of their original allocation into this particular stream. So just over $3 billion could be available across the country. And because of the hard times that we're living in right now, the government has decided to pay 80 cents on the dollar. So we'll pay 80% of the projects. And for Indigenous communities and Indigenous recipients, we'll pay 100% of the projects. It is a time limited. It's in place till the end of 2021, and it's for projects to a maximum eligible project cost of $10 million. So, lower value because they can get done in a shorter time frame. And the categories for them are really retrofits, rehabilitation of provincial, territorial, and municipal buildings, including, as I mentioned before, opening up to types of infrastructure like education, long-term care facilities, hospitals that are needed right now. Another category is pandemic resilience. So allowing for infrastructure investments and capital investment to allow for social distancing and safe use of buildings. Active transportation. We do know that active transportation is really important right now. So to invest in that, as well as mitigation and adaptation, because that is also quite important as we're seeing the severity of weather. So those are the types of categories that are in place for this particular stream. At this point in time, we have a number of provinces and territories that have availed themselves of it, but not all. So we've got the Alberta has availed themselves of it, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland, Nunavut, and Ontario. And they're in the process of transferring funds over into the stream and will be submitting projects. So it's happening actually right now that provinces are deciding whether they would like to take up of this and then how much they would like to transfer in.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis, and thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I'm now going to move on to Mr. El-Khoury. Mr. El-Khoury, the floor is yours. You're on mute, Faisal. Good to go.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's obvious that we see over the past years there have been tremendous climate changes, and that leads us to a serious situation. And I think that the people must be able to feel protected and safe with regard to.
Yes, we're having the translation and the voice at the exact same level, and we can't hear either one. Mr. El-Khoury on the same speaking channel.
Thank you, Mr. Soroka. Mr. El-Khoury, if you can put it on.
Here, I think this is right now. So my question was, we know that with the increase in extreme weather events, we have to ensure that our communities are resilient. Can you talk to us a bit about the fund to mitigate catastrophic weather events and how the program helps protect essential infrastructure? Thank you for the question. The major program is a $2 billion program. And we have announced 59 projects for approximately $1.7 billion. And 2/3 of the projects are for floods. This is a significant area and a significant investment in these communities concerned. And the program aims at investing ahead of time to attenuate the effects, mitigate the effects of these types of climate events caused because of these extreme weather changes. We also have in the COVID stream. The funds for projects under $10 million. And there's also a green stream. There are three ways that we can support projects to reduce risks for Canadians. Thank you very much. We know that infrastructure is the best catalyst for the economy, for creating jobs for Canadians. And the current government, I assume, has made record investments in infrastructure across the country. The question I'd like to ask is that the government has made unprecedented investments in our communities across the country, creating excellent jobs for Canadians. Could you tell us a bit about some of the projects that have been approved in the context of the infrastructure program Investing in Canada, and what types of infrastructure have been built because of this program?
Answer, Ms. Gillis, please.
Thank you very much for that question. In all the streams, there has been approval of more than 1,300 projects. And recently announced projects, we have a new Ronald McDonald House in Halifax. This was an investment of $4 million to have a facility where families of sick children could be housed. And this is an important investment for the community and for Canadians. Another project in Prince Edward Island for a solar storage integration project, $26.3 million to increase megahertz generation and storage.
I'm now going to move on for 2.5 minutes to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My question for Ms. Gillis, I know that your government talks about the role and its commitment and the investment programs with regard to recharging and Canadian business participation. What could you tell us about the total envelope and the distribution of these types of projects, perhaps across the country, and especially for Quebec? I don't know if you have that kind of information available to you right now. What I have with regard to recharging projects, but on our website, there is a map of the various investments, and I can look at the various communities in Quebec, and we can look at our green stream, and we can see what projects have been undertaken in Quebec, and projects that are important for the community and for the province. Thank you very much. So it's publicly available, and the figures, the costs of the projects are available. Yes. My next question, because airports have been hit hard by COVID, and I know that there are programs from Transport Canada, and are there any infrastructure projects, or how you're contributing to help airports to face the problems they have now? Thanks for the question. For major airports that are designated as national airports, only Transport Canada provides funding, but for smaller, more rural airports, we can obtain funding for the rural and the northern areas. And we also have invested in these funds for the extending for extending, lengthening airport runways and for others, and that's all available on our website. My next question, with regard to the Canada Infrastructure Bank, there are many people who have. I'm wonder if in the upper management, how many people speak French in the Infrastructure Bank at the higher levels? I can say that the bank is independent. I can ask the Infrastructure Bank for their linguistic statistics to provide the numbers. I don't have the numbers, however, available to me now.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelona-Duval. I'm now going to go on to Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, you'll have the last round of questioning for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gillis, the budget 2019 estimated that meeting the broadband target is going to cost $6 billion. And we've seen funds rolled out in a bunch of different areas. I'm wondering if all those funds add up to that $6 billion, or is there still a gap between the funds that have been allocated to date and that target cost, or that estimated cost of $6 billion?
So thank you very much for the question. At this point in time, there is the 1.75 billion that we've talked about, the $2 billion from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Our rural and northern fund is eligible for broadband. The gas tax is for broadband, and CRTC has a $750 million fund also eligible for broadband. But that doesn't take into consideration the provinces and territories who are also putting together programs to fund broadband right now, as well as investments from the private sector. So together, all of those different sources will advance and achieve the target.
Okay, thank you. On the question that I asked the minister earlier about electric buses, one thing I've heard from the electric bus sector is that there seems to be a gap in terms of a funding stream for the feasibility studies that cities need to do to ensure that they're using the right technology and using it effectively. Is this something that your department is alive to in terms of, the minister mentioned a fund at FCM, but I understand there are some challenges with accessing that fund specifically for these kinds of feasibility studies?
So yes, QTRIC and transit authorities are speaking with us about what are the components and what are the needs to be able to successfully implement a transition to ZEB.
Okay, thank you. One last question, Mr. Chair. The last one was looking at the main estimates, funding for public transit infrastructure, the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund, the Green Infrastructure Fund, Capacity Building for Climate Change Challenges Fund, Asset Management Fund, and Strategic Infrastructure Fund have all fallen relative to last year in the main estimates. What explains that decline or reduction?
So thank you for the question. So the main estimates of how we base our funding is based on forecasts from provinces and territories, based on projects that are approved and that would be moving forward. So for each of them that we look at with program by program, project by project, and working with provinces and territories to estimate what the claims are going to be in the following year. So when we do approve a project, it is a multi-year initiative, and there will be different claims coming in each year. And so that is our best estimate of what would be required to satisfy our obligations in the future year.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. And thank you to the entire team over from the department. Great work, people. And I know Ms. Gillis, you shouldered most of it, so thank you for your for your time. But as well, I'm sure you're getting some input from your team there. And to the members, thank you as well for a great session this afternoon. I think for the most part, we recognize the investments that are being made, and with that, the benefits to communities, people, organizations, and all those that are the beneficiary of a lot of the investments that are being made. So, thank you, members of the committee. I'm now going to move to your will to look at one motion to consent and receive the consent of the committee to apply one recorded division to the mains and the supplementary estimates. So if I can have that, do I have consensus to actually apply one recorded division versus going through every one individually? Do I have consensus on that? Great, wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to ask the clerk to now read off the names to vote on consent of the committee, which I've already received, to apply the one recorded division, which the clerk is now going to call for, to the mains and the supplementary estimates. Mr. Clerk, the floor is now yours.
So the question is on the combination of the mains and the supplementary estimates. Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a yes. Monsieur El Khoury.
Je vote oui.
I vote yes.
Ms. Jasek.
Yes.
Mr. Rogers.
You're on mute, Churns.
Yes.
Mr. Sidhu.
I vote in favor.
Mr. Cram.
I vote for the motion.
Ms. Cusey.
In favor.
Mr. Shipley.
In favor.
Mr. Soroka.
In favor.
Monsieur Basserlou Duval.
Je vote pour la motion.
I vote for the motion.
I vote in favor as well.
All votes are yes.
Thank you. That will pass unanimously. And to all of you, once again, I thank you, and we'll call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.